Hi friends, this reflection is for the first Sunday of Lent. So, we all got our ashes on Wednesday, now what? In the Gospel of Luke, we hear about the account of when Jesus goes into the desert after being led by the Spirit. Now, mind you, before he goes into the desert, what happens? If you guessed being baptized by his cousin St. John the Baptist, you are correct. He goes into the desert and he's there for 40 days. And of course, he's fasting. He's practically, any other person would be practically, skin and bones, right? Yeah. Well, I don't know how long I could last long without food. I think you can last for a month without food, almost a month that is, and a week without water. Now, keep in mind, your body is made 70% of water, which is essential for many parts of the body. And without the proper water, your organ's going to shut down, and in time, you'll die. So it's very important to hydrate. Whether it's cold, like I'm wearing a jacket right now, right? Still winter here in Philadelphia, by the way. Just remember to hydrate all year round. Now, let's get down to business here. So, Jesus is led by the Spirit to go into the desert. And who is with him other than Satan, right? And let's face it, every Christian has a common enemy. If we watch movies or we read the comics, there's a hero and there's a villain. Let's take, for example, Batman. The most common antagonist Batman will ever encounter, if we have read every comic book known to man pertaining to the Batman universe, or whatever you want to call it, is the Joker. Batman is this. He represents what's good for the people. Both of them are part of a tragedy, but one chose to overcome those tragedies to do something good, whereas the other person decided to go down a different path. That's the case for Satan. He was a fallen angel who was cast to hell because he refused to obey God. And how does he get his revenge? He tempts people to do something that in their eyes is good, is true, good, and beautiful, but it was a counterfeit. And let's face it, Satan is all around us. There's so much noise in the world. But the good news is we can counter him. We look at today at the Gospel of St. Luke. Jesus was tempted 3 times. But what does he do? He rectifies the mistake brought forth by Adam and Eve when they were in the Garden of Eden. He overcame the temptations that Adam and Eve gave into. They were seduced. They succumbed to them. St. Thomas Aquinas reminds us that when Jesus was going in the desert, it was mere for a battle. And let's face it, there's the battle of good and evil that happens every day in our lives. We can look no further than what happened in the recent joint congressional session that happened in Washington. When the president, and by the way, the president on an annual basis can address a joint session. And it's usually televised. But what we saw is one party that wanted to cheer on the values of God and country, whereas another party was turning a cold shoulder. For us, friends, we are going to be encountering the same. Fulton Sheen reminds us that there are 2 philosophies out there. One is the cross, which begins with the fast and ends with the feast. The second is Satan, which begins with the feast but ends with the headache. I don't think it goes without saying that Satan has a tight grip on our culture. We see it every day. We see it on the news. Someone is killed. Someone is kidnapped. There is an epidemic of sorts. And we have to find ways to inoculate ourselves. And I think most of us probably learned that lesson 5 years ago when the bishops were cowards. They never stood up when Mass was essential in the midst of the draconian lockdowns. Every day you're going to go to battle against Satan, friends. Even Pope Benedict XVI reminds us that we're going to engage in spiritual combat, especially during the season of Lent. You know, these 40 days, and practically, we just got through the first 4 days together, right? So there's 36, but of course, I usually count the days during the Easter Triduum because I don't break the fast until it's Easter. Likewise, we all can too. Now, what would this spiritual combat look like? Well, if we're fans of war pictures, you know, you see one side trying to take over its enemy. And most of those movies you watch are probably based on true stories. And the spoiler alert is the outcome is, well, if it's true, what does this side do in order to win the battle? For us, in order to defeat Satan, we must make frequent the sacrament of confession. Are we going to fall during our Lenten journey? Yes. Can we get up and keep going? Absolutely. You know, it may be easy the moment when we're knocked down, we could just give up. I'd rather be the person that gets back up and fights harder. In 1997, there is a one-hit song by Thumping. It was an Australian group, and I think most of it might hear like the refrain, I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never going to keep me down, right? Well, that should be our fighting song, like during this season of Lent, right? Now, I gave up secular music for Lent, but I think my point is clear. We may get knocked down by Satan. You know, he tempts us. But we have a choice. We may just succumb to everything he does, or we get up and keep fighting. So friends, as we're about to embark in full, when we get our Lenten journey in full swing, what do you plan to do to combat Satan? How do you wish to beat him at his own game? C.S. Lewis once wrote a book in the 1940s called The Screwtape Letters. And in that book, Satan tries to influence the main character to give in to all these temptations. But at the same time, he overcomes them. So it's kind of like an allegory of what we just read in the Gospel of Luke. And boy, that 20th century Christian philosopher was ahead of his time. And we're seeing everything oblivious. And it's not just the people, but as St. Paul reminds us in Ephesians, that we're not battling people, we're battling principalities. It's a spiritual battle that we all must not retreat from. We all must step into the breach. Whether we praying outside the abortion facility, whether it be in the public square, you know, preaching the gospel of Christ, whether it be serving the homeless, doing works of mercy, taking in all the buffets, the berate from people going by who practically jeer us for being outside, you know, having a public demonstration of faith. But what matters to God the most is, how do you plan to overcome the things that are keeping us from walking with Jesus? How do we plan to defeat Satan? Suit up, Christian soldiers. It's time to go into the trenches. The battle has just begun. Fight on. God bless.